B'siyat Dishmai, we're going to learn Yoma Daf Lamed Aleph. We're going to start 12 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Chomish Tvilos V'asoro Kiddushin Toivel. And this takes us back to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. The Mishnah tells us that Chomish Tvilos, there were 5 times that the Kohen Gadol would Toivel, V'asoro Kiddushin, and 10 times that he would be Mekadesh Yodov V'raglov from the Kiyor, Toivel Kohen Gadol and Mekadesh Boi Bayom. V'kulon B'kodesh, and all those tvilos were in the Kodesh, where al Beis HaParva, there was on top of the Beis HaParva, on the Dorum side of the Beis HaMikdash of the Azora, there was a mikveh. Chutz mizu belvad, besides for the first of the tvilos, which was done on top of the Shar HaMayim, where the mikveh was actually not in the area of the Azora, it was over the wall, and it was in the Chol, because the first tvila was not between avoida la avoida, it was just starting the avoida, and he was actually at that point just taking off the big day choil, his regular clothes, and putting on the big day kodesh, the 8 clothes he was going to start the avoida with. So that first tvila was not done in the Azora. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon, we learned in a brisa, Chomish tvilos v'asoro kiddushin tovel kohen gadol Umekadesh boi bayoim, v'kulon b'kodesh, b'beis haparva, which means on top of the beis haparva, as we said, chutz mirushoina, besides for the first tvila, shahoisa b'choil, which was in the area above the wall, which was already not over the Azara, it was not in the kodesh, it was in the area which had the kedusha of Harabais, but not the kedusha of the Azara, al gabe Shar HaMayim, and that was on top of the Shar HaMayim, u'b'tzad lishkosa hoisa, and it was just adjacent to his chamber, and this is something that we've already discussed previously, where his chamber was. He had 2 chambers, we've already discussed that. So that's one brisa. Omar Rabbi said as follows, Shma mino, from this, what we just saw now, that the mikveh was on top of there was a mikveh on the Shar HaMayim, which was over a gate, a shar, it was an entranceway. So from there we see that Ein Itam, which was the spring from which water flowed from that spring to these mikvahs, or to the mikvah on top of the Shar HaMayim, it must be that the source of water, which was at that spring, and we know that the source of water water will never rise above the level of its source. So if the water managed to get all the way to a mikveh on top of a shar, it must be that the source of the water was at least that high. And the source came from this Ein Itam, this spring called Ein Itam. It must have been Gavoya Mikarka Azora, it must have been above the height of the Azora, the floor of the Azora, Esrim V'Sholish Amos. Must have been 23 Amos. Why? Ditnan, because we learnt in a Mishnah in Midos, all the doors, all the entrances in the Azora, in the Beis HaMikdash, Gavoyon Esrim Amo. They were 20 Amos high. V'rochbon Eser Amos, and they were 10 Amos high, 10 Amos wide, Chutz Mishel Ulam, besides the Ulam, which was the entranceway into this little area before the Heichal, where the entrance there was much larger, as discussed in Masechet Midos. So what do we see from here? That the height of all the Sha'arim were 20 Amos. So this Shar HaMayim was 20 Amos high. And on top of that was the mikveh. The mikveh also has some height. V'tanya, we learned in a brisa, and we've learned about this already, also in Eruvin and also in Psachim, that the Pasuk says, V'rochatz b'soroi b'mayim. What does it mean, V'rochatz b'soroi, that when he tovels, he washes his body, his whole body in water? It's referring to b'may mikveh. It's not any old water, it's b'mayim, it's water in a mikveh. Kol b'soroi mayim, and his whole body has to be submerged in the water. Shekol gufa oile behen, it has to be enough water that in one go, his whole body can go into the mikveh, into the water, and the water will cover his whole body. The kamohen, how big does this mikveh have to be that we can assume that a person can fit in? Says the Gemara, says the Brisa, it's amo al amo berum gimel amos. It's a square amo, the height of 3 amos. V'sheru chachomim, and the chachomim, they worked out that mei mikveh arbaim sa, the amount of water that would go into this mikveh is 40 sa. And we've discussed at length how the Chachamim came to this understanding, to this measure. This is discussed elsewhere. We learned about it previously in Shas. That's what it says in this brisa, that the height of a mikveh is 3 amas. So let's work it out. If the shower itself is 20 amas high, the mikveh is 3 amas high, the water from the spring has got to fill that mikveh, so it must be that the spring was at least 23 amas off the ground of the Azara. Asks the Gemara, V'ha'ika amotikra v'amo ma'aziva. It's not enough that you say the shower itself was 20 amas and 3 amas for the mikveh, but there's more things to take into account. Number one, the top of the shower itself. The opening was 20 amas. How about the top of the shower? That was an amma wide, an amma thick, an amma high. And also, on top of the shower, they would put this mikveh, and the mikveh itself, amma ma'aziva, it had a concrete floor to absorb whatever dampness or whatever water from the mikveh that would leak out. It would need another amma for that ma'aziva. So add on another 2 amas. So it's not 23 amas. It must be that the ein itam was not 23 amas off the ground. It was at least 25 amas off the ground. Answers the Gemara, no. Sha'arim de Beis HaMikdash, these gateways in the Beis HaMikdash, kiven de shishonin, since they were made of marble, b'mashu avdulu, they would not need a whole amma. It would just be relatively thin and strong, and that was enough. And since it was made of marble, the water would not leak through it, and therefore they would not need an amma of ma'aziva, an amma of concrete under the mikveh. Says the Gemara, okay, granted, we don't need a whole amma for the ceiling, it was made of marble. We don't need an amma for the ma'aziva, because the marble is waterproof. But the top of the shower it has some height, and that height is going to add on the 23 amas. Answers the Gemara, you're right. It was more than 23 amas. But kiven dole havoi amsa, since it wasn't a whole amma more than 23 amas, it was just 23 amas and a bit. Lo yichoshev lehu, it was not necessary to mention it, and therefore Abaye just mentioned the whole amas, 23 amas above the height of the Azara, was the height of that ein itom. And in Yirtzeh Hashem, when we get to Zvachim Daf Nun Daled, we'll see in the Gemara there explicitly that ein itom was actually higher than the Harabayis, and there was even they were contemplating building the Beis HaMikdash over there at that height, and they didn't to the end, and here it becomes clear why, because the mikveh, which was 23 plus amis above the Azara, had to get the water from the ein itom, which had to be higher than it. And Rashi discusses this here on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Continues the Gemara, and now the Gemara is taking us back to the Mishnah. We saw in the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph that Parsu Sadin Shalbutz, they would spread out a sheet of linen around the Kohen, around the Kohen Gadol, Beinoi lebeinaam, between him and the people, in order that it's more tanua, it's more modest, they shouldn't see him going into the mikveh. Says the Gemara, Parsu Sadin Shalbutz v'chulu. Asks the Gemara, Ma'ishno Shalbutz, why was it so important that this sheet should be of linen? It could be any sheet, as long as it would make a partition between the Kohen Gadol going into the mikveh and the people, it would suffice. Answers the Gemara, Kedu Amar Rav Kahana. In the same way as Rav Kahana, on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, we're going to learn about, he says that K'dei Sheyakiru Shavoidas Hayom B'Bigdei Butz, he says that it's important for the Kohen Gadol to remember today's Yom Kippur, and unlike every other day, where every other day the avodah is done with 8 clothes, 4 of linen and 4 of which contained gold as well, on Yom Kippur, part of the avodah was done only with white clothes, not with the gold ones, and therefore they would use butz, and we'll see in Daf Lamed Hey what Rav Kahana was referring to, but the Gemara says here that Hochanami Sheyakiru Shavoidas Hayom B'Bigdei Butz, here too, the reason that they used this sheet of butz was to remind the Kohen Gadol, it's Yom Kippur today, and part of the avodah is being done with only the 4 white garments. And why Rav Kahana said it there and didn't say it here is a discussion. Continues the next Mishnah. Poshat, the Kohen Gadol, he would remove his clothes, and we're referring here to the beginning of the day. We're going in order. It's the sequence of the avodah. He was wearing his weekday clothes, or maybe we shouldn't call them weekday clothes, we should call them Shabbos clothes. It was Yom Kippur. he was wearing bigdei choil. They were not bigdei kohuna. He would remove the bigdei choil, yorad v'tovel. He would go down into the mikveh. Olov v'nistapig. He would come up and dry himself. Hiviu lo bigdei zahav. They would bring him the gold clothes, the typical 8 clothes, 4 of which had gold in it. V'lovash, and he would put them on, and then v'kiddush yodov v'raglov. And he would do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. He would wash his hands and his feet from the water of the kier. That was the first stage. Now he was ready to start the avodah. So what was the first avodah? The korban tomid, the daily avodah, which is why he wore the 8 clothes. This wasn't an avodah where he would go into the kodesh hakadoshim unique to Yom Kippur, because then he would wear the white clothes. Here he was doing the regular korban tomid. Hiviu lo es hatomid. They would bring him the korban tomid. Korotzoy, he would do just part of the shlita, the minimum amount of shlita, the minimum incision needed that it should be called a kosher shlita. You cannot do shlita with 2 people. So he did a minimum amount of shlita, and he didn't cut through all the simonim, the windpipe and the food pipe, as one should. He just did the minimum amount, and then umirek achir shlita al yodoi, and then somebody else, another kohen, would take over and complete the shlita. Since what the kohen gadol did sufficed to be called a shlita, somebody else can finish off. Why was that necessary? Because the kohen gadol had to do shlita, but he also had to do kabbalah sadam. He had to receive the blood. On Yom Kippur, almost everything had to be done exclusively by the kohen gadol. So if he was going to finish the shlita, the blood would start running out before he had time to receive the blood. And therefore, as soon as he could, he would give the knife over and he would receive the blood. Kibeles Adam, he would receive the blood with Zorkoi, and he would throw it onto the Mizbeach, as one does with every korban tomid. After Zrikas Adam, what was the next point? We know that the Ketores was brought inside the Heichal on the Mizbeach there, the small Mizbeach, twice a day, once associated to the korban tomid shel Shachar and once associated to the korban tomid shel Bein Arbaim. So he would go and do the Ketores shel Shachar, the morning Ketores, and to prepare the candles, the lights of the menorah, and then he would be makriv. He would take the esaroish, the head of the korban tomid, v'eseivorim, and the other limbs, v'chavitin, v'esayayin, and the chavitin and the yayin, which we've already discussed previously, was brought every day with the korban tomid. He would then offer them up onto the mizbeach. They would already be on the ramp that was taken there by other kohanim. The kohen gadol would then take the limbs from the ramp and put it on top of the mizbeach onto the fire. Continues the Mishnah. Ketores shel Shachar, the Ketores of the morning, Hoisa Kreva, was brought up, was done, Bein Dam, between the Zrikas Adam, Le'ivorim, and putting the Ivorim, the limbs, onto the Mizbech, as we just saw now. However, Shel Beinu Arbaim, when it comes to the Ketores of the afternoon, it's Bein Ivorim L'Nesochim. He would first put the Ivorim of the Tomid onto the Mizbech, then he would do the Ketores, and then he would come and do the Nesochim. Pour the wine onto the Mizbech. Continues the Mishnah. Im hoya kohen gadol zokin, if this kohen gadol was an elderly and aged person, or istanis, or a very delicate person, and it was difficult for him, he couldn't go into a freezing cold mikveh. This water was coming straight from the fountain, straight from a spring of Ein Itam. So mechamin leichamin, they would, on Erev Yom Kippur, they would heat up some hot water, or matilin netoich tzeinon, and on Yom Kippur they would pour that hot water into the mikveh, in order to Kadesha Tofik Tzinoson, in order to take away the chill of the water in the mikveh. So that's the end of the Mishnah. And before we start with the next Gemara, we have to make a short introduction. And for those of you that would have a chart in front of you, it would be a little bit easier. And this is a sugya that's going to take up a little bit of, it's going to be half an omid here, and then again we're going to get back to it a little bit in the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled. But let's try and understand the sequence of how the Avodas Yom HaKippurim, the Avodah, the service in the Beis HaMikdash, how did that work? So the truth is, it was split into 5. It started off with a regular Avodah, the korban tomid, that was done with the 8 clothes. And then there was part 2, was done with the linen clothes, the bigdei lovan, the white clothes. Part 3 was again done with the bigdei zav. Part 4 was again done with the bigdei lovan. And Part 5 was done again with the big day Zav. Before the big day Zav, at the beginning of the day, he was wearing big day Chol. At the end of the day, when he finished doing the Avodah with the big day Zav, he would again wear the big day Chol. So he was from Chol to Zav, Zav, Lovon, Lovon, Zav, Zav, Lovon, Lovon, Zav, Zav, Chol. That was the day in a nutshell. Now, every time that he changed from one type of begodim to another, he would go to the mikveh. Now, every time that he went to the mikveh, then he would remove one set of clothes before going into the mikveh, and he would put on a second set of clothes after coming out of the mikveh. And every time he did that, removing clothes, went to the mikveh, and put on clothes, every time that he did that, it would involve twice Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. The question is, when was this Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? And that's going to be the topic of discussion here. So, after the mikveh, he would put on the clothes. That everybody agrees with. After he went to the mikveh, he would put on the new set of clothes. After he puts on the new set of clothes, he would do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Everybody agrees with that post Levisha is putting on clothes, Pshita is taking off clothes. As we saw, Poshat, he took off the clothes. So after Levisha, there was always Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So one thing there's no machlekes about. There was Tvila, and then Levisha, and then Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, and then he would do the avodah that would have to be done with those clothes. When he finished the avodah, he would then remove those clothes, and then go to mikveh, and then the process would start again. The big question now is going to be that when removing the clothes, did he go to the mikveh? Did he do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before he removed the clothes? As soon as he finished doing the avodah, he did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, then removed his clothes, and then went into the mikveh. And then, as we saw, came out of the mikveh, put on the new clothes, and did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim again? Or no, did he first remove his clothes, and then do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, and then go into the mikveh? That's going to be a discussion here. So all this works for most of the day. We'll see there's a machlokes exactly when they did the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, before removing the set of clothes or after removing the set of clothes. That's one discussion. But the question is going to be the tvilos that he did, the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim that he did after putting on a new set of clothes are definitely attributed to the Levisha. You've put on a set of Kodesh clothes, you need to do a Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. That's clear. The question is, the other time that he did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, is that attributed to, which he did either before or after removing the clothes? So if he did the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before removing the clothes, then it's clear that it's attributed to the removing the clothes. In the same way as after putting on new clothes, you did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, before taking off the clothes you finished with, they would do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. That would be understood. In the event that they would do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after removing the clothes, then he's already removed the clothes, and now he's about to go into the mikveh. When he comes out of the mikveh, he's going to put on the new clothes and then do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim for the new clothes. The question is, if the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim he's doing before the mikveh, is that attributed to the removal of his clothes? He removed the clothes, but in contrast to the opinion who says that you did the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before removing the clothes, this opinion says you did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after removing the clothes, but it's attributed to the removal of the clothes. Or no? Do we say that as far as the removal of the clothes are concerned, there's no Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim at all? And both times you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, it's always attributed to putting on the clothes. Just one of the tvilos would be, one of the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim would be before the tvila, and the other one would be after the levisha. One would be before putting on the new clothes, and one would be after putting on the new clothes, but both of them would be attributed to putting on the new set of clothes. Why am I confusing you all like this? Because the difference is going to be, and the big question is going to be, the very first time the first time, and there's also going to be an issue with the last time, but let's leave that for now. The very first time, before he puts on the big day Zav, he's taking off the big day Chol. Removing big day Chol certainly wouldn't warrant doing Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim is to do with the Levisha of Big Day Kodesh or the Pshita of Big Day Kodesh, not Big Day Chol. So that very first time, when he takes off his Big Day Chol, and he's going into the mikveh the first time, and then he's going to put on the Big Day Kodesh for the first time, and then do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, then is he going to do a Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before going to the mikveh? So if the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim is attributed to the removal of clothes, that means also, besides for one of the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, which are always done after putting on new clothes, the other one was for taking off the old ones, then at the very first time there would be no Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. You don't do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim for removing Big Day Chol. However, if you say that both of the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim are attributed to the Levisha, then there would be a Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim even the first time. There would be twice Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before starting the work the first time. One before the Tvila, and one would be after the Tvila, but both would be attributed to the Levisha. And that's what we'll have to see. And where we're coming from, let's now go back to the Mishnah we just learned. We just learned in the Mishnah, what's the sequence? He took off the Big Day Chol. He went to the mikveh. Nobody mentioned doing Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Why not? It wasn't mentioned. And then Olav and Istapik, he came out, they brought the Big Day Zav, he wore the Big Day Zav, and did Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So the Mishnah clearly does not mention doing Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim before the Tvila, after taking off the Big Day Chol. And we're gonna have to work out how this works. And just one more point before we see this inside, that on Daf Lamed Daled, there's going to be a machloikus in the Mishnah between the Chachomim and Reb Meir. And the machloikus there is primarily whether the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim that's attributed to the taking off the clothes, was it done before taking off the clothes, or was it done after taking off the clothes? That's going to be a machloikus in Daf Lamed Daled in the Mishnah between Reb Meir and the Chachomim. According to the Chachomim, that they would do it before taking off the clothes, and according to Reb Meir, they would do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after taking off the clothes. However, we're going to have to see, since according to Reb Meir, you did the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after taking off the clothes, then it could well be that it was actually attributed not to the taking off of the clothes, but being a pre-tvila for putting on the clothes. That would be the opinion, the understanding, that putting on clothes required two Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, one before the tvila and one after the tvila. And that's what we're going to discuss now. Says the Gemara, Amru Rabbonon Kameder of Papa. There's going to be a machloikus here, a discussion between the Rabbonon, who said something in front of Rav Papa. Rav Papa is going to try and argue with it. At the end, Rav Papa is going to agree to what the Rabbonon said, because we're going to find an explicit brisa to that effect. So there's going to be two understandings of Reb Meir. And the difference between them is, can our Mishnah be Reb Meir or not? So let's see this inside. Amru Rabbonon Kameder Rav Papa. Ha deloik Reb Meir. This Mishnah is not like Reb Meir. Now, according to the Chachomim, everybody agrees that one of the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim was attributed to Levisha, and one of them was attributed to Pshita. And it happens to be that the Chachomim hold that the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim that was attributed to the Pshita, to removing the clothes, was done before removing the clothes, not after removing the clothes. So if so, when removing the Big Day Chol, there was definitely no Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. And so the first Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim that would apply would be when putting on the new clothes. So that could very well fit with our Mishnah, that the Mishnah first mentions Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim after putting on the new clothes. That's clear. The question is, can Reb Meir follow this? Because Reb Meir said that after removing the clothes, they would do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. The question is that attributed to the removal of the clothes? not like in contrast to the Chachomim that did it before the Pshita, before the removal. The Reb Meir says he did it after the removal, but it was attributed to the removal, in which case Reb Meir would agree that over here, the first time when removing the big day chayil, there would be no Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tvila. However, if the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, after the Pshita is attributed to the next Levisha, and it's just a Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tvila that was before the Levisha, if so over here also, even when removing the Big Day Chayil, since he's about to put on the Big Day Kodesh, it would need two Kiddush Yadayim Raglayims, one before the Tvila and one after the Levisha. And that's the discussion. So the Rabbanon said to Rav Papa, that this Mishnah is not like Reb Meir. Dear Reb Meir, because if it was Reb Meir, Kiven de Omar Trei Kiddusha Alevisha Ovid Lahu. This is the Rabbanon. They hold that Reb Meir says that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after the Pshita is actually the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tvila that's associated to the next Levisha. And since both of them are attributed to the Levisha, Hochanami, so to here, by the first time that they're putting on the Big Day Kodesh, there should be twice Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim for the Levisha, one before the Tvila and one after the Levisha. So the Rabbanon say this Mishnah cannot be Reb Meir. Omalu Rav Papa. Rav Papa says no. He says Rav Papa says you made a fundamental mistake. It's true that Reb Meir says that you do the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after removing the clothes, but that's not because it's before the Tvila, that's before the Levisha. No, it's attributed to the Pshita, to the removal of the clothes. And since it's attributed to the removal of the clothes, then the first time when they're removing Big Day Chayil, there's no such Kiddush, there's no Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Bein Rabbanon, Bein Reb Meir, says Rav Papa, Chad Apshita the Big Day Kodesh, Chad Alevisha the Big Day Kodesh. One of each of the sets of Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim was attributed to the removal of clothes, Big Day Kodesh, and one for the putting on the Big Day Kodesh. And the machlekes between Reb Meir and the Chachomim is just whether the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim that's attributed to the Pshita, was it done before the Pshita or after the Pshita? And they're actually arguing on how to read this pasuk. That the pasuk says, Ufoshat. It says, Uva Arin el oil moed. Ufoshat is Big Day Aboda Shelovash, B'voy el HaKodesh v'nichom sham. He would remove the begodim. V'rochatz es besori b'moim. And he would then tovel, b'mokim kodesh, v'lovash es begodov, v'yotzav also seilosav es oilasam, etc. So the pasuk says, uposhat he removed, v'rochatz, and he went into the mikveh, v'lovash, and he put on the new clothes. That means the pasuk puts a hekesh, compares the removal of the clothes to the putting on the new set of clothes. The question is, how are we comparing them? Everybody agrees that regarding the Levisha, the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim was done after the Levisha. The fact that it was done after the Levisha, there's two ways of looking at it. Number one, it was done after the act of putting on the clothes. So we could compare that to Pshita, that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim of the Pshita should be after the act of removing the clothes. Or no, we could say that in the same way as the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after Levisha, the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim was done while the person had his clothes on, so too regarding removing of the clothes, the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim should be done whilst he was still wearing the old clothes before the Pshita. And that's the Machlekes, the Chachomim and Reb Meir. Reb Meir Sovar, Makish Pshita leVisha, we compare the Pshita to the Levisha. Ma Levisha, Loivish v'achakach mekadesh, he did the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after putting on the new clothes. Af Pshita, Poishet, he first takes off the clothes. V'acharkach mekadesh, that's what Reb Meir holds. Rabbanon Sav, the Rabbanon say no, Makish Pshita leVisha, we compare it differently. Ma Levisha kushu lavush, in the same way as when he did the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after putting on new clothes, he was clothed when doing the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Kashu lavush mekadesh, af pshita, so too when he removes his clothes, kashu lavush mekadesh, he should do the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim that's attributed to the pshita before removing his clothes. So that's how the Rav Papa said that it could be that even according to Reb Meir, then he says that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim of the pshita is done after the pshita, but it's associated to the pshita, and therefore the first time when he was removing the bigdei chol, then pshita of bigdei chol does not need any kiddush yadayim raglayim, and therefore our Mishnah that does not mention kiddush yadayim raglayim before the tefillah, when changing from bigdei chol to bigdei kodesh, there was no kiddush yadayim raglayim, could even be Reb Meir. That's what Rav Papa wanted to say, not like the Rabbanon. Omru le Rabbanon. The Rabbanon said to Rav Papa that in our Mishnah, you're right, and the understanding of the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled, you could say that the Reb Meir, who says that you did the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after the Pshita, is attributed to the Pshita as Rav Papa wanted to say. However, the Rabbanon are now going to say, I've got an explicit brisa, not like that. We're going to see in the next brisa explicitly that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim that was done after the Pshita of Reb Meir was not attributed to the Pshita, it was actually attributed to the next Levisha, that he had to tovel before wearing the new clothes. He would go to mikveh before the Tvila, and he would do Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tvila, and then he would do another Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after the Levisha. But they're both attributed to the Levisha. The difference will be that if so, before the first Tvila, he's going to have to do Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, even though he's removed Bigdei Chol. The Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim is not attributed to the removal of clothes, it's attributed to the putting on clothes, and therefore, and indeed, according to Reb Meir, one would have to do Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before that first Tefillah, and our Mishnah is not like Reb Meir, will be like the Chachomim, as the Rabbanon said at the beginning of the Gemara. Omru le Rabbanon Rav Papa, umimotzes omres hachi. Could it really be like you're suggesting that according to Reb Meir, that first time that he toveled to put on the new set of clothes, there was only one Tefillah after putting on the new set of clothes, and there was only one Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim after putting on the new set of clothes, and no Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tefillah? This is contrary to a brisa. Well, Tanya, we learned explicitly in a brisa, Porosu Sadin Shel Butz Beino Lebeino Om. They spread out this sheet between the Kohen Gadol and the people. Poshat, he took off the Bigdei Chol. V'yorad, and he went into the mikveh. It must be the Bigdei Chol, because if we're talking about later on in the day, when he removed the Bigdei Kodesh to put on a different set of Bigdei Kodesh, then there would have to be a Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Over here, we're now in the opinion of the Tanakama of this brisa, the Chachomim, and there's no mention here of Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, so it must be the first time. He took off the Bigdei Chol. V'yorad v'toval, he went into the mikveh, like in our Mishnah. All of an istapik, he came up and dried himself. Heviuloi bigdei zov, they brought him the first set of clothes of kodesh, which were the bigdei zov. V'lovash, he put them on. V'kiddush yodav v'raglov. That's the opinion of the Chachomim. Everybody agrees with that. But it must be talking about the first time. Otherwise, no one should come and say this brisa is maybe talking about changing from one set of bigdei kodesh to another set of bigdei kodesh. No. From the fact that it does not mention Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before the Tefillah, it must be is talking about the Bigdei Chol he removed. And let's see what Reb Meir holds then in that case. Reb Meir Omer, Poshat, he removed the Bigdei Chol. V'Kiddush Yodav V'Raglov. He did Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Why are you doing Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim? According to what Rav Papa wanted to say, that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before all the Tefillos, after all the pshitos was attributed to the pshita, then over here when he's removed, he was poishad, the Bigdei Chol, there's no tvila. So you see clearly that the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim is nothing to do with the pshita, it's to do with the levisha. And therefore, even after removing the Bigdei Chol, it's the first of the two Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim that are going to be attributed to the new clothes he's putting on, the Bigdei Kodesh. So he would do Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. V'yorad v'toval, he would then go to the mikveh. All of an istapik, he would come up from the mikveh and dry himself. Hiviulei bigdei zov, they would bring him the gold clothes. V'lovash, he would put them on. V'kiddush yodav raglov, and then do the second Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. So you see clearly, like the Rabbanon once said at the beginning, that according to Reb Meir, both tefillos each time are attributed to the levisha. So Omalu, so if Papa said, Itanya Tanya, okay, you have a brisa explicitly like that, then I agree with you. I've got nothing more to say, and that's okay. Says the Gemara, Bishlei Miller Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir that we just learned in the Maskana, that every time you put on a set of Kodesh clothes, there was two tefillos for the levisha. So it's very easy to find 10 kiddushin. 10 times they did Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, because 5 times he put on Bigdei Kodesh, gold, white, gold, white, gold. And each time there were 2 Kiddushim. So that's okay. Elo Rabbanon, according to Rabbanon, who say that there was one of each of every set of Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim was attributed to the Pshita, and one was attributed to the Levisha, then you didn't have, then when you first changed into Bigdei Kodesh, and you were taking off the Bigdei Chol, you only had 1 Tvila, like we saw in our Mishnah here. There was 1 Tvila. And then if you work it out, then Tvila number 9 is going to be after putting on the Bigdei Zav for the last time. The 5th time he was going to do the work that day, the 5th stage, he was putting on Bigdei Kodesh, and then the ninth Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim is going to be for the Levisha of the Bigdei Zav. And you're missing one. You've only got 10. Tisha Hava. Answers the Gemara, Omer Lecha Rabbanon, Kiddusha Basra, Ki Poshet Bigdei Kodesh, Ulovot Bigdei Chol, Ovid Lehasam. Says that you thought that when removing the Bigdei Kodesh for the last time, you don't do any Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. You thought that according to the Chachomim, it's true that one of the Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim are attributed to the Levisha and one to the Pshita. But we assumed that what type of Pshita, of removal of clothes, requires a Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim before it? Only a type of Pshita that is afterwards going to put on Bigdei Kodesh. But the last time when he's going to be removing the Bigdei Kodesh and put on the Bigdei Chol, you thought that then, even by removal of those clothes, there's no Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Says the Gemara, but that's a mistake. That after removing the Bigdei Kodesh for the last time, there would also be a Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Kiposhet Bigdei Kodesh, when he removed the Bigdei Kodesh, Ulovish Bigdei Chol, Ovid Lehasam, then they would do another Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. So even according to the Chachomim, you have 10 times Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. And in Yitzchok in the next shiur, we're going to continue from here.